Welcome to Reading Rule, y'all, where we talk about all things rural YA literature and to the rural authors who write it. I'm your host, Dr. Shea Parton, and I'm excited to talk to you about today's topic at hand. If you're a teacher, student, or community member in a rural community, my hope is that the content here honors you and your experiences by discussing and analyzing books that can serve as a mirror for you. If you're an urban or suburban teacher, student, or community member, this series is for you too, and I hope that it can provide nuance to the stereotypical depictions of rural people so often seen in popular media. So come on in, and let's get to it. Hey y'all, and welcome to the final installment of this series on Allison Strange's short story, Fate for a Cat, which won the inaugural Literacy in Place Rural Teen Writing Contest. I'm so excited to be talking with her today. Allison is currently a junior at Burns High School in North Carolina. She was inspired to write the story by her cat Roxy, which I'm hoping she'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. A writer of horror fiction, this story was a new adventure for Allison in a different genre, and what a successful adventure it was. After high school, Allison plans to be a crime scene investigator. Thanks so much for joining us, Allison. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm real excited.
So I start every single one of these that I do with every author off with the same question. And that question is, where are you from? And how do you think that shaped who you are as a person and a writer?
Well, I'm from North Carolina. I'm from this little part of North Carolina that's very woodland and has like a lot of like animals and all that. And so that really inspired me to get into finding out about animals, and that's also kind of helped me with my story because we always had like a lot of cats and we had a lot of deer and cow around. So since I'm from more like the rural part of like North Carolina, like more little town, little neighborhood parts, you you feel more entwined with people. That's my thing. Even though like I'm very bad socially, but I always felt more like this seems like such a homey little place, and I always loved that this about North Carolina.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks from smaller places feel that way. Like the town that I'm from only had 800 people in it. And so a lot of people like to talk about how people in small towns always know everybody else's business. Like it's a bad thing, which sometimes it
Mhm.
can be. But at the same time, like if you know what everybody's going through, you are better able to help them get through it. And so I always felt that way too. I like the way that you talked about that as entwined and connected with one another, because I
Mhm.
think that's exactly what it is. And I think that that is a huge benefit of living in a rural place, is that you have that connection with people and that closeness where you can help folks out.
Yeah, definitely. We're very, very close with our neighbors and stuff. One of our neighbors, she brings us bread. She bought us a giant teddy bear whenever I had my scoliosis surgery, and I love it to this day.
Oh, that's so sweet. That is so sweet.
Mhm.
When I was coming up, if there was a farmer who couldn't pull in their crops or was having trouble, like the whole community would come together and take in their crops for them. And I just always remember feeling like that was really important and that was really cool about the place that I was from.
Mhm. Like really helping each other.
Yeah, and I think that definitely affected me as a person, that I wanted to continue to do stuff like that because it felt I saw how important it was to the people that it was helping, and so it just sort of became part of who I was, like I wanted to continue to do those things no matter where I was.
Like spread kindness. I guess
Yeah,
like yeah, that's a good lesson.
yeah. And I think that not that you can't learn those things in bigger cities, but I think that it looks different and probably feels different for those folks.
Definitely, yeah. Definitely, yeah. Like, as I think about, cities I've been in, they're so different than what I'm used to. Like,
Yeah.
Atlanta and Charlotte, oh my god, it's crazy. People
Do
are
you
way different.
do you feel out of place when you're there?
No, not really. I kind of like it, but like, it's like, oh, I'm confused about this place since you're not used to it.
Yeah. When I moved to Austin, I was definitely confused about how to get around. And I'm still terrible at public transportation. You know, like when you live in a place where the only transport you have is your car, if it's working and you hope it's working. Um,
Yeah.
I can't read a bus map or a subway map to save my life.
Oh, me either. Like, never been on like one of those subways. That'll be cool though.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't think I ever have. I've been to New York City, but when I went, I just walked everywhere because I was too afraid to use public transportation.
I don't blame you.
Okay, so what do you, so sort of in connection with that, right? We were sort of talking about how people like to talk about how in small towns everybody knows everybody else's business and how that's a bad thing, right? Which in my opinion, it doesn't have to always be a bad thing. It can also be a really good thing. So we already talked about that one thing, but is there another thing that you think people get wrong about rural people and or rural living that you want to set the record straight about?
Um, hmm, that's a good question. Uh, Sometimes I think people think we're like mean or something, or like something like that. I don't get that since a lot of people, especially I've been around, they've been really kind people, especially like older people and like the grandchildren and all that. They're all so sweet. But like I wish people saw that like other people are much more nicer than what they think they are.
Yeah. I think there's sort of that tight knitness that we were talking about, right? That closeness. I think sometimes is only close for people who are in the community. And then when people come from
Hmm.
outside the community, I think it's easy to be like, you're not from around
Intimidated,
here.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then those people, I think, when things are so tight knit and everybody knows everybody, um, and it can feel uncomfortable to the people both inside and outside the community when someone new arrives. Um, but I don't think that it is as malicious as a lot of people like to make it out to be. I think it's just that rural towns are guarded and cautious,
Yeah.
because historically there have been people who have come into those towns and not done
Hmm.
very good things. And so
Yeah.
that suspicion of outsiders, I think, from a history standpoint, sort of makes sense.
Mhm. 'Cause, like, as I think about it, I'm like, yeah, the little neighborhood I have, we're, like, very protective of our land and our little neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, whenever you grow up in a place where there are resources, there are always people who want to have those resources. Um,
Mhm.
and so, I think that a lot of rural places have just become very particular about who, who comes in and trying to figure out
What
like
they
what their
do.
motive is, like why
Mhm.
they're
Like,
there.
yeah, like, it's a little judgy, but also, like, you're just trying to make up, like, trying to, like, make up, "Hey, who are you?" And trying to make sure everyone's okay and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, because you are so close to the rest of your community. You want to protect your community, and when someone who isn't from that community comes in, you have to make sure that they're not there to do something bad, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So
like, I
you
don't.
want to talk a little bit about your story?
Sure.
Okay. So before this episode airs, I don't know if you had a chance to look at what I usually do, but I'm going to treat your story just like I treat every other rural book that I would talk about on the series. And I'm going to do a little mini analysis of how place works in it. I'm going to talk about how I would teach it in my classroom. And then after that, then I'll post this interview. So one of the things that I thought would be interesting for folks to hear about is like what inspired you to write this story, and what that process looked like.
Alright. One of the big inspirations for that was, of course, my cat Roxy. With her, we got her whenever she was just a baby. No one really wanted her, so I was like, "Yes, this is my little kitty now." And I think during that time, it was recently she got like something got in her eye and we had to remove it, and so we were still taking care of her, and I was still worried about her and stuff, so I was thinking about the cattle we had, like, near us, and then my cat, and I was like, "I wanna write a story kinda like that." And like, with the old woman that, Eden knew, I was thinking about, like, one of my neighbors, she's an older lady, and she knows everything about everyone, and so I was like, "That would be cool to put in my story," like, wanting to try and too. And,
Yeah.
yeah. And I have a lot of cats. Roxy's not my only cat, but she's, like, big my little baby girl. She's my big number one.
I
And
thought it looked like she was missing an eye in the picture that you sent me.
mhm, she only has one eye. We always had a ton of cats whenever I was little, and, like, cats have always been, like, a big part of my life, of course, I always loved cats, and Roxy was, like, the best cat I could ever ask for, like, she's so loving and stuff, but very clingy, and she thinks she needs to be number 1 all the time because I treat her like that. But, um, I love all my cats. That was, like, the biggest inspiration for that, and, um, my teachers, they was told me that, "Hey, there's this, wool writing contest, you should go join it and stuff," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And so I just wrote something up and just sent it in, didn't think much about it, and then that one day that I got it, I was like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." Like, I didn't even think nothing about it until, like, I noticed, like, "Oh, Lord, something did happen with it," because I thought it was a cute little story, I didn't think it would get much attention, but that's the best surprises.
Mm. One of the things that really struck me about your story is the voice of
Mhm.
the of Eden, of your main character, and the conversations that she has with the
Yeah.
cat. It just seemed so, it felt really real and authentic, and I just felt like Eden had such a great voice. Um when you
Thank
sat
you.
down to write, like, what's your process like? Like, how do you feel like you thought about, or like, what sort of things do you think about when you're working on doing that, on building a character and creating that voice?
I think about, like, my favorite character aspects and what's the main message or, like, plot that I wanna go with. Like, with my other stories, um, I was going for one of my stories is more of, like, a revenge story, then another one is more of, like, a artistic interpretation of, like, something else, and then all that. And so after I found out, okay, what's the message, I wanna make a character out of that and take the, aspects of the idea and make it into, like, a personality trait or how someone or something acts towards animals, people, anything.
Mm.
And, like, then I'm like, "Okay, first character done. Do I wanna add more characters? Do I just want this to be its own thing?" And, like, then I think about, like, how the world works and all that. And that's mostly inspired by things I like or things that I recently saw or something. That's like yeah.
Yeah, so for this story, a lot of it was like centered around your place, right? Like, where, like, your
Mhm,
cat and the woman that you know, and so it was because it was anchored in that. I feel like that's one of the things that really makes your story sing, is that it has that sense of place and it has that authenticity because you're writing it based on something that's very real to you, you know?
mhm. Like, that always helps to, like, put in a part of yourself into something so it feels more authentic.
Mm. Yeah. I would definitely say I'm on that side as well, but then there are other people who I think feel some trepidation about doing that, right? About getting so close and personal with their work. But for me, I think I'm drawn to work like that. Like, I love memoirs. And I love
Mhm,
um stories where you can tell that the story being told is somewhat either like semi autobiographical or like somehow connected to the writer's experiences, because I think that it feels more real to me. And I like getting to know people. And so when I read things that I feel like I can get to know people through those things, I think that's my favorite kind of reading.
Me too. And like you can tell it's from the heart. Like that helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So you write, I know you said you write other kinds of stories. You like to write horror fiction and like crime fiction, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about your writing process as a writer? Like, I feel like everyone has a little bit of a different process. And so, like, when you have a story idea, like, what do you do? Like, what happens after that?
Like I make like a quick I write down like a quick idea of what um like the main character would do or like how do I want like maybe like the main story, the climax of and maybe the end because I don't know, I always forget the beginning, but I like think, okay, this is the main thing. I need to work with this a lot. And like the ending too, which I'm like, well, I need to make sure this ending goes with what my main idea was. And then I just like kind of start from there. And beginnings always kind of rough for me, so I don't know what to write right there. Since I already have like my whole idea conjured up, I'm like, okay, how do I introduce this in the right way?
Hmm. So you're a bit of a plotter in that you sort of have like you know where you want to go. You know how either a certain character is going to be, or you know how the story's going to end, or you know like what the main message of a story is going to be about. And then you face sort of the blank page and you start trying to write yourself into the story to where you can get to where you know you want to go. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, everybody works a little bit differently, and so it's fascinating to me to hear how writers work and to hear how they because some people will just have like the seed of an idea and then they'll just sit down and they'll just start writing. And that to me
Mhm.
feels really intimidating because I have to have
It
some sort
is.
of idea of where I'm going or what I'm doing, or I just feel like I'll never get there. I'll never
Mhm.
produce anything that's like, okay, this is a story. Um, so for me, I'm a bit of a plotter too. I have to have some sort of frame or idea about either where I want the story to go or what I want sort of the problem and resolution to be or something. Um, and then that way I know where I'm going and I can get started. How do you get past that sort of, because I think a lot of people face that, right? When they sit down to write and they have a blank page and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Like how do I start? How do you get past that to write?
I think about like my favorite media and how it started, or like how I like the writing of this one creator. What about I try to twist it into a way that I like, or maybe start with something dramatic or something.
Okay, so
And
you
like,
like to you find it helpful to draw on the work of other people?
of course, yeah.
Who are
It's
your
like
favorite
other
people to
people.
draw on?
Um, God, like different games. To be honest, I play a lot of games, so it's like
Okay.
I'll think about how they started. Like, also, I love like, this is gonna sound so cliche. I love Edgar Allan Poe's work. I love how, like, fancy it is and stuff, so I think about, "Oh, I should make this fancy." And, so I get that from those 2 places a lot.
Okay. Yeah, Poe is great. I don't think that's cliche at all. I think that when you want to be a good writer, I feel like you draw on the people who are good writers. And I think that
Mhm.
pretty much the entire academy is in is in agreement that Edgar Allan Poe was a good writer. So I think that's always a good place to start. Um,
Yeah.
are there more contemporary like horror fiction writers that you think are really good, or any stories or books that you've read that you feel like have inspired you to keep writing?
What I don't, read that much. I mostly, like, that's crazy, but I, like, mostly watch, like, movies and games and
Okay.
all that. But I love, like, different works. I'm like I love older, like, scary movies and all that. I love, like, the works of, Stephen King and,
Mhm.
um, just, like, I love looking at them telling, like, how did they do this? And being like, "Okay, so I can do that too, but I need to make it in my, like, own way." Like, make
Yeah.
it unique.
Yeah. And I absolutely believe that watching movies is reading. Like, there
Mhm.
are a lot of people who think about literacy as a little bit wider than just your stereotypical like reading and print writing. And for me, I think watching film and watching TVs is definitely a way of reading. And so it would make sense because it's a way of storytelling, right? And I think it
It
makes
is.
total sense that you would draw on that. What's your favorite Stephen King movie?
Um, God, uh, that's a hard one. I love, Pet Cemetery. That
Okay.
one's so interesting. Like, it's scary, but I love it.
Is there is there a particular like storytelling mechanism in that film that you think is so good that like you wish you would have come up with it?
Like, God, I love the idea of, like, I don't know, I love the idea of, like, the whole thing. Um, I wish, like, I don't know how to explain it. I love, like, the whole idea of it. There's, like, other movies I can think of that I wish I could have thought of, like, um, Lord, I would've loved to, like, come up with the idea of this little kid's movie. It's called, Spirited Away. This is more of like a, it's a Japanese movie, but it's so good. It's so autistic and, um, just great and unique.
Well, I will have to check it out on your recommendation. Um,
Mhm.
my favorite Stephen King movie, I think, is The Shining, and I feel like that is also
Oh,
kind
that
of
was good.
cliche and stereotypical. But just the way, I mean, they even invented a piece of equipment to make it feel creepy, right? Like they invented
Mhm.
the dolly can't for the camera to be able to pan in and out and move around and feel
Or
ethereal and
like
not jerky, right? And
mhm.
so that to me, I think if you have to invent something, to tell the story, I feel like that means you are telling a really good story.
It's like you have to make up something. That's crazy. Like, I love that. I love that so much. I didn't know that they made the dolly out of that.
Yeah,
That's
so yeah,
more you
so to
know.
get that sort of like creepy, like feeling like you're floating as you're following the
Mhm.
camera through certain scenes, they invented this like cart that would sit on rails so that it would move
Yeah.
and it would move smooth instead of being jerky, like because you can't
Mhm.
walk that smooth no matter how hard you try, right? And they just wanted it
Mhm.
to feel very ghost-like and creepy.
Yeah.
And so they invented that piece of equipment to be able to tell the story that way.
That, like, contradicts with, like, the older, horror movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th, which was, like, really shaky and with
Right.
the, camera work and stuff. So
Yes.
that's interesting to know.
And it's cool to think about how those different techniques create different feelings.
Mhm.
And very much the way that you sort of talk about your story too, right? Especially in like our email correspondence, like the difference between telling a horror story and telling Fate for a Cat is
Yeah.
super different. And
It's
so
yeah.
being able to employ those different techniques, um, I think that's a really good example of that.
Mhm.
Um, Do you have any favorite books that you have read recently? Or any favorite stories?
Um, Recently, no, but, like, over the years, yes, I have read some books that I absolutely love to this day. I have a poster of one of
Yeah,
the
I
books
saw your
back here,
Outsiders poster.
The Outsiders. Oh, I love that. That was so good. I One of my favorite books ever. And like movie too. That movie was great. Um, that's my favorite story. And there was this one, oh, it was this wonderful book. Its name was just Mockingbird, not How to Kill a Mockingbird, just Mockingbird. And it made me so sad, but I loved it so much. And it was more like a more heartfelt type of story too. And like, that's where you get me, whenever it's more, like, heartfelt, just like the book Wonder and all that.
Mm.
It's more, like, personal, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you can feel that in Fate for a Cat. Um,
Mhm.
Again, I think sort of that like writing your place and writing what you know and writing about something that you love, like interacting with animals. Um, I think that that comes through in Fate for a Cat for sure.
Mhm.
Um, what advice do you have for peers, for your peers who are writers and who may be thinking about submitting to the writing contest?
I know it's, like, intimidating. I know that's the first thing I'm gonna say. I know it's intimidating and, like, you think, "Oh, I'm not gonna do good," but, like, even if you don't place anything, you still did it, and I think that's the best thing you can do. It's just, like, you did it, and so that's your biggest accomplishment is you doing what you felt like you wanted to do and putting it out no matter if you think, like, "Oh, people think this is stupid," because most of the time it's not gonna be. And that always holds me back thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be stupid or corny." No, it ain't. Just try it out. There'll be people that will love it, even if you don't think there will be.
I love that advice. I wholeheartedly support that advice.
Good.
Do you have any suggestions or advice for teachers who are thinking about encouraging students to submit their writing or maybe making it part of the teaching that they do in their classrooms?
Um, just, like, inspire your students and, like, remind them that the sky is the limit. Just do what you feel like doing, and don't let someone say that, "Oh, I don't like that," because if you love it, just do it. It's your creation, it's your art. Just do and, like, just tell your students that you can do anything you want to. Whatever you feel will express what you feel the best. And that helps me.
I was gonna ask, I was gonna say, is there something that either Mrs. Ellis, your teacher sponsor, or other teachers in your ELA classes and your English classes, are there things that your teachers have done to inspire you that you feel like other teachers should do more of?
Oh, I had my creative writing teaching, Laura Parker. She would like read some books to us and then she'll show us some genres and she'll let us do whatever we want if it's just in a genre. That's how we mostly did it. And that helped a lot. She let you do what you wanted to do, but just help you. And I think, oh, I love that so much that you could have like that freedom. And I hate that I can't take any of the classes. I took all the classes, but it was like it's great to show like different things and like genres that you may not be interested in, but still like dip your toes in them, see what going on and stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think choices is really important, and sometimes I think that as adults we forget, as you know, how important choice was to us as young folks, and sometimes in classes that aren't electives, you know, the classes that have standardized tests associated with them, I
Oh,
think we
yeah.
can feel pressure not to allow students that choice. But I think you still can. And so I think that that's really good advice to teachers, that making sure that you make room for students to have choice will inspire them and encourage them to write stuff that they care about, um,
Mhm.
and hopefully submit it to the contest.
Yeah, because you don't want something that's half made. You want something that is from the heart, like, you know, that your student really loved making it.
Mm.
Because if they don't like making it, then it's not gonna be good, like, because you didn't put your heart into it.
Or you might not be able to put your heart as much into it as what you would if you had the choice, you know?
Mhm.
Like you can still try your best and still try to make it as good as you can, but there's always going to be some kind of like little piece missing that is, you know, is just not possible because it's not what you necessarily care about.
Mhm. It's like yeah, I see that a lot, and, like, whenever we have to write, like, essays and all that, I'm like, "I don't wanna do this if it's something I don't like."
When you're given like a prompt, like write about this.
Mhm, and it's
Yeah.
not something that I want to do. At the end of the year, Miss Ellis did give us, like, do, like, an essay on, a topic, like an argumentative
Mm,
topic, anything you want. And she just let us do with that. And I loved doing that. That was so interesting.
mm. Yeah, because it was
And
from you, right? Like you got to pick.
and like you get to hear what other students did too.
Hmm. So this podcast is a lot about like it, I mean, the whole thing it's about really is rural representation and the representation of rural communities in books and literature.
Hmm.
And as a student, as a rural student, and even as a rural teacher, like rural stories weren't really a part of my my curriculum as a teacher, because in my defense I didn't know any better, and but I do now, and now that I know better I do better. um
Hmm.
but as a rural student I don't feel like I read any books about rural people either. What would you say, to rural, well, to teachers, whether they're rural or not, about the importance of writing and reading rural stories?
It gets to know different parts of like um the world better. Like
Mm,
what if you live in a city and you don't know what the countryside is like? So you may need to read like a good book about it or something that's more like modernized and all that, so you can know, oh, I like that place, maybe I want to live there. Or
mm,
if you're someone who's from the countryside or rural, you can just see how other people may interpret the place that you live and how maybe you can see it too.
mm. Yeah, that's really brilliant actually. There's a scholar named Drudine Sims Bishop, and she writes about how readers need mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors in books, right? So we need books
Mhm.
that reflect our own experience back to us as mirrors. We need books that let us see into the lives of people who are different than us. So windows,
Mhm.
and then sliding glass doors are books that offer us a way into like experiencing um some some experience or something that's different from us. And
Yeah.
so that's exactly, you're talking about exactly what she talks about, that without rural representation in literature, rural people don't get to see themselves, especially not in a contemporary way, represented in literature. And folks who live in suburbs and cities also don't get to see authentic and more like non-stereotypical, because I think there are a lot of rural
Mhm.
stereotypes represented widely, everywhere.
Mhm.
um Duck Dynasty, swamp people,
Yeah.
moonshiners, like there are those
Yeah.
like in spades everywhere. But stories like yours, Fate for a Cat, that sort of represents rural life in a more like real and complex and nuanced way, don't exist as much in publishing, which is one of the reasons why I started this contest, because I want to encourage people to tell those stories so that folks have the opportunity to read them. you know
Of course.
um so thank you so much for submitting your voice and submitting your story. um
Well, thank you for looking at it. I love that. Love that I got recognized.
well, I'm so glad that you love it, and I hope that you keep writing. I mean, I know you say
Oh,
that you want to
thank
be
you.
a crime scene investigator, but I hope even as you go out and make your way in the world that you keep writing, and that some of the stories that you tell continue to be rural stories.
I'll definitely not give up my like art and writing and stuff. That's a big part of me, just
I can
who I
tell.
am. So
I can
yeah.
tell. And that's awesome. I love that. Um, I wanted to say too, there are a lot of horror authors who write rural stories.
Mhm.
So if you are looking to read a good book in that genre, I have some recommendations. um,
Yeah.
if you, I don't know, do you like slashers?
Oh yes, I love them.
Okay, so Adam Caesar, and I
Mhm.
can email you this information too, but Adam Caesar has a duology. The first one is called Clown in the Cornfield, and the second one is called Friendo Lives. And it's like if Scream and It, like Stephen King's
Oh.
It, if Scream and
Uh-huh.
It had a baby, it would be this book.
Okay.
It's
That sounds
really, really
interesting.
good. And it's also like, I think horror gets a lot of like a bad rap for being like fluff or brain candy, or like somehow
Yeah.
it's not sophisticated or it doesn't tackle real issues. But there are a lot of scathing political critiques in this book that I thought were really well done and really interesting. Um,
I love
so
whenever I love whenever horror like does that, whenever it does go into realistic um stuff that's happening in the world.
yes, and this is very much connected to that. So highly recommend those. And then Courtney Gold has a book called oh, I've just lost the Dead in the Dark. Super good. This girl's dads are like ghost hunters.
Mhm.
And they go to their hometown that's in rural Oregon, and there's like this being, this darkness that exists.
Mm.
And kids keep going missing. It's really good. Um, Dead in the Dark. And then one more recommendation.
Okay.
Have you ever read Truman Capote's In Cold Blood?
No, I think I've heard of it, but
Okay.
no.
So it is like a narrative retelling of this murder that happened in rural Kansas, um,
Mhm.
in I think it's the 60s. But
Oh.
so that in and of itself is really good if you haven't read that and you like that kind of thing. Um,
Mhm.
but Kinder Blake has a book called All These Bodies, that is kind of like that in YA form, like young adult, with like a little vampire thing thrown in.
I like vampires.
Okay. Okay. So, I would highly recommend those books. And I have more, but I won't make you sit here and listen to them all. um,
Okay.
but if
Thank
you
you.
ever want recommendations, feel free to hit me up because I'll have them. I actually never used to be much of a horror reader. I liked horror movies when I was younger.
Mhm.
Um, but I have a writer friend who writes like horror short stories, and he recommended me some because they had rural settings, and I really love them. And so like now that's like that's like the thing that I search for, like, can I find
Yeah.
a new horror book set in a rural place?
Yeah. That's like I like that you got into something new because of a friend. That always helps.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We've been chatting for about an hour. But I just wanted to say thank you so
yes.
much for joining me today. Thank you for submitting your wonderful story. And I wish you all the best in your writing endeavors. And I hope to see your name in print on either a short story collection or a novel at some point.
Of course. Thank you for having me and like reading my story and all that. That means so much to be recognized and my work and stuff. I love that. That made me feel good about myself, like up in the sky. Like didn't
Well,
stop talking about it.
well, don't stop talking about it and keep feeling good because you deserve it. And also because what you did took a lot of courage, and you are an excellent writer. And
Thank you.
so I just hope that you continue to use your talent because we need that in the world.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that means a lot to hear that. Oh, I love that so much.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and keep it a viable endeavor for me, it'd be great if you would like and comment on the YouTube episode. You could talk about what you liked most or what you walked away with. It'd also help if you'd subscribe to the channel. You can also head over to the Support Us page on the Literacy in Place website. There you can learn about all the different ways you can support this work. Like, you can like and follow the website itself, find out where to engage with us via social media, and go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Or you could shop our storefront on bookshop.org to get the book featured in this episode or any other books that catch your eye. You could also buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com and donate once or set up a recurring donation. All of this would be immensely helpful in keeping this show going. So thanks a bunch for doing what you can. Well, that's it for this episode. Until next time, y'all come back now, would ya?